Imagine this. May 25, 1979. After more than 50 years of operation, a production line in Southall, West London, is ready to come to an end. A final truck is slowly making its way down that line. In a few hours, the men who built it will leave those gates for the last time after spending their whole working lives honing this trade in this same factory. However, very few people who purchase, operate, or repair this truck nowadays are truly aware of this particular fact. The makers of that last car do not own the badge on its front. It didn't. Furthermore, that badge's name wasn't even original. Before it came into contact with this factory, it was used. The further you delve into this tale, the more bizarre it becomes. The Leyland Marathon was the name of the truck. It appears to be a proud, elegant flagship product from one of the most well-known automakers in Britain. Beneath that exterior lies one of the most subtle and acrimonious jokes in the history of British industry, and practically no one who constructed it was ever permitted to utter it aloud. In order to get the joke, you must first recognize the peculiarity of the organization that created it. Leyland Motors silently absorbed its competitors for decades. Early in the 1950s, Albion Motors joined. Scammell came shortly after. Then, in 1962, Leyland acquired the Associated Commercial Vehicles business, bringing with it Thornycroft and something much larger, AEC, the renowned Southall firm that had been producing buses in London for 50 years and had an engineering reputation that truly challenged Leyland's. By 1968, British Motor Holdings automobile division and all of these formerly hostile rivals had combined to form British Leyland, a vast conglomerate. This seemed unstoppable on paper. It was actually anarchy in a suit. Suddenly, dozens of manufacturers that had been fierce rivals for decades were required to share parts bins, design offices, and a unified corporate brand. Even though trucks were one of the few segments of the empire still making a real profit, the automobile division was losing money at an alarming rate, and this hemorrhaging silently starved the truck side of the business. In the early 1970s, Leyland's designers were tasked with creating this pressure cooker. Construct a brand new showcase vehicle. Something that could finally compete with Scania and Volvo, who were beginning to gain significant traction in the British market. It had to be important what they created next. What they produced was truly remarkable. In 1973, a high-cab tractor unit with a unique ergomatic cab and a brand new 280 horsepower TL12 diesel engine was introduced to the public. It needed a name that suggested the future. A moniker that made Leyland's aspirations clear. Rather than looking forward, the company's designers looked back. A coach chassis known as the Marathon was created decades earlier in the 1930s by a manufacturer named Maudslay, which was later absorbed into this same complex family tree. In 1973, no one at Leyland had been employed by Maudslay. The new truck's driver wouldn't even be aware that the business existed. It was irrelevant. Leyland just removed the previous moniker and attached it directly to their brand new flagship. Just that choice ought to have been a footnote. Because of the location of this new flagship's actual construction, it isn't. The irony begins to bite at this point, and it does so quite forcefully. This shiny new truck was not constructed in a Leyland facility at all, but it was intended to carry the Leyland flag into a new decade. Using engineering expertise dating back to World War I, it was mostly constructed inside AEC's own Southall facilities by AEC employees. AEC has been producing its own trucks under its own strong naming history for generations. These vehicles include the Majestic, the Mammoth, and the Mercury, all of which bear the iconic triangle AEC logo. On that same manufacturing floor, those same hands were now putting together a truck that would roll out through the gates bearing a Leyland insignia and a name that had never belonged to either Leyland or AEC. Maudslay owned it. No one at Southall had ever worked for this company. This was not a minor, unimportant complaint. The fact that this flagship truck, which was made wholly by their hands, was unable to wear the triangle AEC emblem they believed it had deserved is the subject of sincere, seething fury on the factory floor, according to accounts from workers and historians. The new conglomerate's internal politics would just not let it. No matter whatever factory produced it or which engineers established its reputation, a product this significant had to have the Leyland name. Thus, under a name that had not originally belonged to either of them, the very men who had dedicated their professional lives to enhancing AEC's reputation spent their last years on that assembly line creating someone else's legacy. The joke is that, and before things improved, they were going to grow worse. The early years of the Marathon did little to allay such resentment. The truck, which was rushed into production on a short budget, had brakes that obviously needed more work and a cab that bent unnervingly under heavy turning. These were the obvious wounds caused by British Leyland's unrelenting cost-cutting efforts colliding with an ambitious engineering brief. However, There was something truly outstanding hidden beneath those jagged edges. The TL12 engine, which was derived from AEC's well-known AV760 diesel, soon established itself as one of British Leyland's most reliable models. In the hands of hauliers who put a lot of effort into it throughout Europe and the Middle East, it accumulated enormous mileage. Leyland, to its credit, paid attention. The quality of the inside was improved. Brake systems were completely redesigned. A modified version, dubbed the Marathon 2, debuted at the Scottish Motor Show in 1977 and was now offered with a larger 290 horsepower Cummins engine. The risk was profitable. The Marathon 2 proved to be lighter, somewhat faster, more fuel efficient, and significantly less expensive to purchase than its Swedish rival in a widely reported road test comparison with a recently released Volvo F10. That outcome was significant for a company that many people had written off. Leyland also realized something important. It was necessary to demonstrate that the Marathon 2 could withstand conditions considerably more severe than anything Britain's highways could present in order to win over hard-nosed, doubtful hauliers. With cars planted into operational fleets transporting actual freight throughout the Middle East and cameras rolling as far away as Doha to record evidence of its dependability for advertising, company test drivers pushed the truck deep into intercontinental routes. Leyland even created a special version known as the Marathon Special for operators who had to deal with the intense heat of the desert. It was designed for harsh operating circumstances and had the option of air conditioning, which was a true novelty in a British truck cab at the time. Independent business owners also took note. Some hauliers, relying on the TL12 engine to endure thousands of harsh, unforgiving miles far from the closest dealership, created entire enterprises operating steel and heavy machinery from the industrial northeast of England all the way to Saudi Arabia. For a brief period, it appeared as though the Marathon might permanently silence its detractors. It was not given the opportunity. Both time and the fate of the plant that constructed the Marathon were never on its side. In order to avoid complete bankruptcy, British Leyland was nationalized in 1974. For the remainder of that decade, the company gradually shifted its heavy truck production from Southall to the Lancashire town of Leyland. For years, the writing has been on the wall. After 67 years of operation, the AEC factory eventually closed its doors permanently on May 25, 1979. The Marathon, a truck built by workers whose own century-old name had never once appeared on its badge, was the final vehicle to come off that production line. It was named after a now-defunct competitor. After that, production of the Marathon was temporarily moved to the Scammell facility in Watford to fill the void until Leyland's next-generation truck, the T45 road train, arrived in 1981 and won Truck of the Year. The T45 road train was constructed exactly on the foundation that the unloved, unbadged Marathon had discreetly set down first. That is the entire sour joke concealed in a badge's 4 basic letters. A truck designed to demonstrate that British Leyland's commercial vehicle business still had real fight left in it was put together by the employees of a company that was slowly and purposefully winding down around them. Instead of paying tribute to the factory and workers who actually built it, the truck's name was taken from a third, now-defunct company. The corporate reorganization of the 1970s and 1980s would eventually cause AEC, Albion, Guy, Scammell, and Thornycroft to vanish as distinct brands. The only company that survived that purge was Leyland itself, which is now owned by PACCAR and the DAF and continues to manufacture trucks in Lancashire. Leyland is a rare survival from a time when practically everything around it was destroyed. Because so few people at the time anticipated that Marathons and Marathon 2s would endure this long, let alone become the focal point of a restoration project decades later, surviving Marathons and Marathon 2s are truly prized today among British antique truck enthusiasts. Restored models, which are frequently completed in the liveries of the independent haulage companies that formerly relied on them for harsh, merciless continental runs, are still frequently seen at antique commercial vehicle exhibits around the United Kingdom. The allure for those aficionados goes beyond nostalgia for a stylish cab or a truly reliable engine. It is the understanding that this one truck represents the pivotal moment in the history of British commercial vehicles, the product of a proud and self-sufficient AEC workforce, and the first true testing ground for concepts that would later develop into the award-winning T45 line. The next time you see a Leyland Marathon parked with pride at a vintage truck show, its badge freshly shined and its cab shining, it's worth stopping to consider what that emblem truly stands for. It's more than just a Leyland. Built inside a plant that was already operating on borrowed time before the first bolt was even tightened, it is the very last honest creation of AEC's Southall craftsmen, bearing a name that never belonged to either of them. Was that irony ever discussed openly on the manufacturing floor, or was it just accepted as the unspoken price of working for a firm that was gradually erasing its own history? It's worth pondering the question. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below.